The Big Mac isn't just McDonald's most recognizable sandwich, it became a way to talk about money itself. Economists, journalists, and even everyday readers found themselves using it as shorthand for the value of global currencies. Since 1986, The Economist magazine has published what it calls the Big Mac Index, a lighthearted but surprisingly useful tool built on the idea of purchasing power parity. The logic is simple. If the same sandwich costs very different amounts once you account for exchange rates, then maybe those exchange rates are out of balance. But before a burger could double as an economic yardstick, it first had to become part of everyday culture. That credit goes back to Jim Delegati, a Pennsylvania franchisee who came up with the Big Mac in 1967. He saw that McDonald's smaller burgers weren't enough for adults looking for a filling meal, so he experimented with stacking 2 beef patties, cheese, lettuce, pickles, onions, and a special sauce on a sesame seed bun. His local tests proved a hit, and by 1968, corporate leaders had rolled it out nationwide. Not long after, it became an international staple. The name itself, Big Mac, was coined by a young McDonald's secretary, Esther Glickstein, a detail that seemed trivial at the time but ended up giving the sandwich its enduring identity. The design of the Big Mac offered something most fast food items didn't: consistency. Whether bought in Ohio, Tokyo, or London, the core sandwich looked and tasted almost identical. That sameness turned out to be the perfect foundation for what The Economist wanted in 1986, a simple way to illustrate currency values across countries. Want to know if the yen, euro, or peso was over or undervalued? Compare what a Big Mac costs against its US price. Suddenly, a dense theory like purchasing power parity felt accessible to anyone. The Big Mac Index quickly caught on as more than just a gimmick. Professors used it in classrooms to teach exchange rates. Reporters included it in financial stories to break down complicated ideas for readers. Even investors referenced it in presentations as an informal check on market trends. The example was almost absurd, yet it stuck because it made something abstract tangible. Instead of debating exchange rate formulas, you could just point to the sandwich everyone knew. Of course, the Big Mac's role in economics only happened because of its role in everyday eating. By the 1970s, it had cemented itself as the company's flagship. Commercials leaned on it as a symbol of a real McDonald's meal. Abroad, the sandwich adapted to local markets while retaining the same outline. In India, it became the Maharaja Mac made with chicken, while other regions experimented with larger patties or shrimp variation. No matter the changes, McDonald's made sure to tie local versions back to the Big Mac identity, keeping the sandwich recognizable everywhere. This global identity meant customers weren't just buying food, they were buying into a piece of consistency in a changing world. Economists exploited that consistency for financial comparisons, while diners used it as a familiar anchor when ordering abroad. Few products in history have managed to cross into both roles, to be treated as both a lunch and a legitimate economic benchmark. Still, food culture has shifted, and the Big Mac hasn't always come out on top. Younger generations, especially Gen Z, lean toward meals built around sustainability, cleaner ingredient lists, or plant-based proteins. Surveys show that many in this group want to see ethical sourcing and health benefits baked into the foods they purchase. Against that backdrop, the calorie-heavy Big Mac can feel dated. Social media adds to the pressure, since the meals that attract attention on TikTok or Instagram often push novelty and bold design rather than a sandwich invented in the 1960s. McDonald's has responded by modernizing without rewriting the recipe entirely. In recent years, the company has put through more than 50 upgrades to its burgers, including caramelizing onions directly on the grill with the beef patties, softening the buns, and using cheese that melts consistently. Each change is small but adds up to a fresher, more appealing presentation. And to balance nostalgia with novelty, McDonald's sometimes reintroduces limited spins like the Double Big Mac, with 4 patties stacked high. These tweaks show that the company understands the Big Mac's dual role. It must appeal to older fans who treat it as tradition while also finding ways to remain relevant for a new generation of consumers. Even with cultural headwinds, the numbers remain staggering. In the US alone, more than 500 million Big Macs are sold every year. That scale keeps the sandwich central to both operations and identity. For McDonald's leadership, losing ground on the Big Mac isn't an option. It's not just about selling one product, it's about proving that the company can keep its brand cornerstone alive even as tastes evolve. What makes the Big Mac unique is this dual life, ordinary food on the counter and symbolic marker in financial pages. Few other products have managed the same balance. You don't see currency charts built around a slice of pizza or a can of soda, but the Big Mac continues to serve as both a meal and a metaphor. It's consistent enough to be measured, recognizable enough to be iconic, and commonplace enough to feel universal. Generations of customers grew up seeing the Big Mac as the sandwich that defined McDonald's. Generations of readers learned about currency values by checking how much it cost across borders. It's a rare case where a consumer product managed to make itself useful to two entirely different worlds. That crossover, a burger explaining both hunger and economics, remains one of McDonald's most unusual achievements. And while the Big Mac carries that strange status, it's not the only part of the McDonald's menu that has inspired myths. Some symbols don't come from economics at all, they come from taste. Ask around and you'll hear the same claim repeated with confidence. Coca-Cola just seems to taste better at McDonald's. Why Coke tastes better at McDonald's? For McDonald's, even something as ordinary as a soft drink became a deliberate strategy. The chain has served Coca-Cola since its early years, thanks to a partnership forged back in 1955 between Ray Kroc and Coke executive Y. Pratt. That collaboration grew into a uniquely close relationship, so close that Coca-Cola created a dedicated division just to handle McDonald's worldwide. This wasn't just a supply deal. It was a shared system built to make sure a Coke from one McDonald's tasted the same as a Coke from another, no matter the city or country. One of the key differences starts with how the syrup is stored. Most restaurants receive Coca-Cola syrup in standard plastic bags, which are cheaper but less protective. McDonald's is one of the only major chains that insists on stainless steel containers, limiting exposure to air and light. Once delivered, that syrup goes into refrigeration long before it touches a customer's cup. Both the water and the syrup are pre-chilled, then mixed in insulated fountain systems rather than room temperature tanks. This keeps carbonation intact, stops ice from melting too quickly, and ensures the first sip has the same bite as the last. The process doesn't stop there. McDonald's water is filtered multiple times to smooth out flavor differences from city to city. Syrup ratios are held slightly higher than at many other chains, giving the drink a bolder edge. And then there's the detail few notice, the straw. McDonald's straws are wide on purpose, allowing larger sips and stronger hits of flavor and fizz across the palate. Each piece of the system is small on its own, but together they create something people immediately sense as fresher and crisper. Put simply, McDonald's has built a ritual around a standard cola by doubling down on overlooked details. Chilled syrup, filtered water, sturdy steel containers, colder mixing temperatures, controlled carbonation, and a wider straw. The payoff is a drink that tastes more balanced and sharper than the same Coke from a gas pump or movie theater. Even sugar ratios work slightly in its favor. McDonald's small Coke contains about 40 grams of sugar, while an equivalent drink at a competitor like Panera has closer to 67 grams. No wonder the experience feels distinct. The formula isn't just consistent, it's tuned. That attention fits neatly into the business arrangement too. McDonald's long-standing deal with Coca-Cola guarantees no other restaurant can purchase syrup at a better rate than McDonald's. 70 years on, this has given the company a pricing edge as well as a flavor advantage. Coke at McDonald's became less a drink and more part of the brand itself, something customers expected to pair with fries just as much as they expected an Egg McMuffin in the morning or a Big Mac at lunch. Customers may not notice all those operational steps behind the counter, but they notice the result. A McDonald's Coke cuts cleanly through salty fries and burgers, refreshing in exactly the same way each time. That reliability feels like comfort in a cup. It's not about a special secret recipe. It's about a chain deciding to treat soda with the same seriousness as its food. Competitors poured syrup and water into fountains and called it a day. McDonald's engineered the entire environment to make sure its cola never dropped below a certain standard. In an industry where chains fight fiercely to copy burgers, breakfast sandwiches, and even desserts, McDonald's quietly gained an edge by making its soda more satisfying. A basic drink became part of the value proposition and part of the memory of dining there. And when customers leave, they don't just think about the sandwich or fries. They often recall how sharp the Coke tasted alongside them. Those small details might seem like extras, but they reinforce a bigger point. McDonald's success has never come solely from introducing new products. Much of it comes from enforcing consistency, sometimes in places customers would least expect. A fountain drink most people take for granted ended up setting McDonald's apart just as much as any flagship sandwich. That's not to say engineering a better soda could solve every problem. Even the coldest, sharpest Coca-Cola couldn't protect McDonald's from one of the toughest tests it ever faced, balancing customer expectations against economic reality. For years, people counted on the chain not just for taste, but for the promise of stretching loose change into a full meal. And when that promise collapsed, the fallout was unlike anything a drink dispenser could fix. The rise and fall of the dollar menu. For years, McDonald's had built its brand on consistency, but nothing shaped its image of affordability quite like the dollar menu. Launched in 2002, it was marketed as a simple promise: put familiar staples on the menu for exactly $1, drawing customers with unbeatable bargains and trust that they'd spend extra once inside. On paper, it was a neat solution to fend off rivals in the early 2000s value wars. In practice, that single dollar became one of the most complicated prices McDonald's ever advertised. The early numbers revealed cracks almost immediately. Within the first month, data showed customers were spending about 3 cents less per visit than before. That figure looked tiny, but when multiplied across thousands of stores and millions of transactions, it chipped away at revenue. The cheap items, instead of acting as bait for larger orders, became the main attraction. Customers leaned on dollar burgers, fries, and drinks without upgrading. The strategy delighted diners, but left many franchise owners frustrated, since menu staples like the double cheeseburger actually cost more to produce than the $1 price point allowed. Franchisees in high-cost areas were hit hardest. Rent, wages, and ingredient costs ate through their margins, yet they were expected to maintain prices promoted nationally. Some stores in expensive cities, including Manhattan, quietly adjusted. The so-called dollar menu double cheeseburger often appeared closer to $2 in practice. That sort of local variation clashed with corporate's image of uniformity and left some customers confused about what they could really expect when they saw the dollar advertising. By the late 2000s, it was clear the strict $1 ceiling couldn't hold. McDonald's swapped out the double cheeseburger for the McDouble, cutting one slice of cheese to shave pennies off costs. Those pennies mattered at scale. At the same time, items began creeping above $1, $1.19, $1.39, marking the first visible retreat from the concept. The dollar menu still existed in name, but it was already mutating behind the counter. That shift became official in 2013 with the rollout of the dollar menu and more. Instead of pretending that every option could stay fixed at $1, McDonald's experimented with tiers: $1 at the low end, $2 for slightly larger options, and above that for premium items. The intent was flexibility, giving operators breathing room while preserving the image of a value menu. Customers weren't convinced. To them, the rebrand felt like a bait and switch. The magic of the original dollar menu had been its clarity: a burger, fries, or a drink for pocket change. Once flexibility entered the picture, that clarity disappeared, and with it the charm that had drawn so many in. Not long after came another attempt, McPick 2. The idea was simple: let customers choose 2 items for a bundled low price. While the format sounded creative, franchisees quickly pointed out that it damaged margins even more severely than most promotions. One operator even called it the most devastating hit to cash flow in a decade. What looked like innovation from corporate often translated into financial strain in practice. The gap between what the brand promised customers and what franchisees could realistically deliver was becoming harder to ignore. The breakthrough didn't come until 2017. That year, McDonald's reintroduced value pricing with the $1, $2, $3 dollar menu. It positioned items across 3 clear tiers, finally acknowledging that a true $1 menu no longer worked universally. The new system balanced customer expectations with franchisee needs, offering flexibility without disguising the higher prices. And crucially, it delivered results. U.S. sales rose 2.9% in the first 3 months. For the first time in years, both corporate and operators had reason to say the model worked, even if the dollar part was more brand memory than financial reality. Still, those gains had limits. As inflation accelerated in the 2020s, ingredient costs, labor wages, and distribution all climbed higher. A meal that once fit neatly under $3 increasingly jumped beyond $5 or $6 in cities like New York and Los Angeles. Items like the McChicken, once synonymous with the true $1 tier, now hovered closer to $3. The dollar banner remained on menu boards, but its meaning became symbolic. Customers vented online, posting old ads showing full bags of food for less than what a single sandwich cost today. Nostalgia made the past seem idyllic, but the economics that had once made the dollar menu viable simply no longer existed. By 2025, the original vision had dissolved almost entirely. The phrase $1, $2, $3 still appeared, but in practice, many of those items cost double or triple depending on the market. What a dollar actually bought was little more than a small cone or the occasional add-on. To longtime customers, it felt like the spirit of the menu had been broken. Yet the desire for value hadn't gone away. It had shifted into new promotions designed to give the impression of affordability at a higher baseline. Chief among those was the $5 meal deal, rolled out nationally in 2024. The bundle included a sandwich like the McDouble or McChicken, small fries, nuggets, and a drink, a curated package meant to stretch a family's dollars without leaning on the outdated single-price promise. For many budget-minded customers, it delivered enough substance that the higher figure still felt fair. For McDonald's, it drove foot traffic at margins that operators could tolerate. At the same time, the company leaned heavily on digital strategies to keep the concept of value alive. Through its app, McDonald's pushed deals like buy one, add one for $1, exclusive bundles, and loyalty perks that encouraged routine visits. These promotions reframed value as something dynamic and personalized, less about static menu boards, more about unlocking rewards through participation. It gave customers the satisfaction of a bargain, while giving the company more predictability and data. In that sense, the original dollar menu lives on, if only in spirit. It exists now as a branding idea, a reminder that McDonald's built an identity around always offering something affordable, even if the definition of affordable keeps shifting with the economy. Where once a teenager could fill up after school with coins from a glove compartment, today that same ritual comes in the form of bundled meals and app notification. Customers may gripe, but they still associate the Arches with value, and that loyalty remains powerful. Looking back, the rise and fall of the dollar menu mirrors broader economic changes. In 2002, it was possible to make a profit at $1 because costs were low enough to support it. Over 2 decades, rising expenses eroded that feasibility until the number became symbolic instead of sustainable. What stayed consistent was the strategy underneath. McDonald's always needed to anchor its image to affordability, even as the exact pricing evolved. The dollar menu's legacy is cultural as much as financial. It shaped how a generation thought about fast food, embedding the idea that McDonald's would always have something cheap enough to feel effortless. Even now, stripped of its literal meaning, that legacy influences how the company sells itself. It may no longer be a menu of single-dollar items, but it's still a powerful reminder that pricing strategy can define not just sales, but public perception for decades. McDonald's learned that not every strategy translates cleanly from the boardroom to the stores. Sometimes bold experiments succeed, and sometimes they collapse under the weight of their own promises. The dollar menu belonged to both categories, cherished by customers, strained by franchisees, reshaped until the name meant something different. And that cycle of testing and adjusting wasn't unique. The chain would roll out plenty of other experiments, some stranger than others, in the hopes of finding the next lasting idea. The weird and forgotten menu experiments. McDonald's long history isn't just about Big Macs and fries. It's also filled with strange experiments, some ambitious, some baffling, and many quickly forgotten. A handful of these oddities remain infamous, either because they flopped spectacularly or because they live on in small corners of the world as curious survivors. Together, they show how far the company has been willing to push its menu and where the limits of customer trust were drawn. One of the more notorious attempts was the McLobster. Launched in 1993, it tried to graft the seafood prestige of a New England lobster roll onto the McDonald's counter. On paper, the pitch made sense. Lobster rolls were popular regionally, so why not attract locals who might otherwise ignore the Arches? The sandwich featured lobster meat, lettuce, and a light sauce, tucked into a hot dog-style bun. The problem was price. At $5.99, far more than a typical burger meal at the time, it instantly clashed with customer expectations. People turned to McDonald's for low-cost comfort, not luxury seafood that cost almost as much as ordering at a coastal diner. Sourcing lobster consistently across locations also proved complicated, making quality fluctuate from store to store. The McLobster quietly slipped into obscurity after its short run. Today, it appears only in limited form around parts of New England and eastern Canada, where lobster rolls are part of the local identity. Everywhere else, it's remembered as a mismatch between fast food and fine food that most customers never wanted. An equally strange chapter came in the late 1980s when McDonald's set its sights on pasta. That experiment produced McSpaghetti, along with sister dishes like lasagna and fettuccine alfredo. The logic was clear. Pasta was cheap, broadly loved, and familiar across households. The trouble was that people didn't want it from McDonald's. Serving spaghetti in a paper carton didn't carry the same appeal as a fresh bowl at an Italian restaurant, and the longer prep time slowed service compared to burgers. The mismatch became obvious, and by the early 1990s, nearly all locations had dropped the idea. Strangely, one exception still exists: Orlando, Florida. To this day, McSpaghetti can be ordered at select stores there. For locals, it's just another quirk of living in a tourist city. For visitors, it feels like a secret Easter egg to check off between trips to Disney or Universal. In its own odd way, McSpaghetti's survival turned from a failed national rollout into a regional curiosity. Some of the company's strangest missteps came not from food quality but from context. In 2002, McDonald's launched the McAfrica in Norway, a pita stuffed with beef, cheese, tomatoes, and salad. The item itself wasn't unusual compared to other global experiments, but its name and timing triggered backlash. At the very moment it debuted, several regions in southern Africa were experiencing severe famine. The release was immediately criticized as tone-deaf and exploitative. News outlets and activists pointed out the absurdity of marketing an Africa burger in a wealthy Scandinavian country while millions on the continent faced starvation. Under pressure, McDonald's apologized and allowed aid organizations to place donation boxes inside restaurants. Still, the damage was done. The McAfrica became less a footnote in culinary history than a lesson in how brand decisions can turn into global PR crises when timing and naming go wrong. Not all failed experiments came from cultural blind spots. Some were rooted in simple taste mismatch. The hula burger of the 1960s is perhaps the clearest example.